welcome. I'm Anna Marie Cruz with FoundHer. Welcome to our second episode, and thank you for joining us on this wonderful Saturday morning. It's supposed to be a scorcher here in LA. I'm excited about that. So we're here today. Obviously, we are a platform for women who launch. We talk with amazing women who have founded their own companies and who are running their own businesses. And today, I'm so excited to be talking to this phenomenal young woman, and I can't wait to introduce her to you. But for now, I want to also talk about our entrepreneurial journey with this show. So as you know, this is our second episode, and I want to thank you for those of you who have been supporting and who have watched our first one, who have given me feedback. It's been great to hear, what people think about this platform, and also how our guest from last week has also inspired them. So thank you so much for that. So just a quick update on this entrepreneurial journey. Last time I think I mentioned that, this is really just a project that's, been created by the geniuses, Rodney and myself. Rodney has so much experience in production, and I, of course, had this idea of creating this platform for women entrepreneurs. So together we created FoundHer. And between now and since our last show, we have designed this amazing sign. You can see it here, right? Our FoundHer sign, an awesome DIY project that Rodney actually came up with. And if you like the sign, you can learn more about it on our website. We'll tell you exactly how we made this with, maybe, I think it was $15 or something. It's just part of the process of not only launching, but really figuring out what to improve to make this production even better. Because what we're really intending is for you to tune in and to feel like what we're working on or what we're creating for you is up to your standards. So of course, give me feedback on what you're seeing and what you'd like. Just a quick thing. Yesterday I went to an event and ran into a friend who just greeted me with, "Hey, I found her." And that just made me feel so good. I want more of that, because I think the more people we can actually reach, that means the more people we're able to provide these resources and information to. And that's really the whole goal of our show. So anyway, that's a quick update on what we've been doing. Now I want to talk about this amazing, amazing woman sitting across from me, Marina Terteryan. And she is not only a serial entrepreneur who's delved into a lot of different interests that you'll learn about, but she's also a design strategist. She's a well-rounded design strategist with a passion for service design, and that's something that I've touched on, or I've learned about a little bit, and I'm just so excited to talk to her about it, because it's not only an approach to innovation and to business, but it's also an approach to how you can connect with your customers. And Marina is a very experienced marketer, so she comes from the agency side, and she's launched, like I said, she's launched a lot of different things, but in particular a marketing agency. And now she's doing these pop-ups to also support other entrepreneurs to kind of go through their process of service design thinking. So without further ado, hi Marina.
Hi, this is so exciting. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Welcome. And actually, this is the space where we met, right?
It is. We met just a few weeks ago at a friend's shared studio space.
Yeah, so you were working with Brian on some projects as well. But before we go into that, I've talked to you now for a couple of times, and I feel like every single time I am learning even more interesting things about how you've figured out how to take on this entrepreneurial journey. So I want to just,
so nice.
Yeah, I want to just, talk about a little bit more about your background, and also just your, where you've been, how you got here.
Yeah. Well, it's been definitely an interesting, windy path. I started my career in a very odd way. I was studying finance and real estate, and I thought I was going to go to law school. And so I was on that path, just, blinders on, steam ahead. And then at some point I realized that I don't actually want to do any of those things. I just didn't know any better, when I was younger, and I didn't really have any role models in the creative space. But I thankfully got introduced to the path of writing and journalism and public relations, because that was the constant that kept coming up for me naturally. Mm-hmm. So that led me to do public relations, which led me into marketing, because it was a very short jump. So I got to do a lot of combination jobs that allowed me to specialize, but then also try new things. Mm-hmm. So I just started in marketing, and I was lucky that I started at a time when digital marketing was becoming more and more popular. It was kind of just evolving in front of my eyes. That's so great. I got to do everything. I got to do social media, I got to do digital strategy, I got to do web development. I got to hand code HTML email blasts back when that was a thing. Before MailChimp ever existed. So I got to really see the gamut of the marketing world. And I got to do advertising and creative directing and manage a team of graphic designers. So it was really cool to go through that evolution. And this was all in a corporate setting. And that, at some point, I was excited during the, most of it, but at some point I realized that this is not it for me. That didn't want marketing manager to be what was etched on my grave.
Was there something, what were the factors? Why didn't that feel like it was you?
It was, I had certain philosophies for how I approached business that were very natural to me, that were not natural in the settings that I was in. Mm-hmm. So for a very long time, I just felt like I was a lunatic most of, from 9 to 5 most of the day, because I couldn't find a place where certain philosophies were okay and just certain methods of working. Mm-hmm. And then I actually, in really trying to actively not feel like I was crazy and that there was a place for it, I discovered design thinking. And it's very uncanny that every single thing that I struggled with that made me feel like I'm wrong, was every single thing that design thinking champions. Mm. So I value radical teamwork. I value, I value flat structures in teamwork. No power tripping or, hierarchies. And design thinking is radical collaboration. That's a huge part of it.
I love how that's described. How
yeah.
you put it.
That's not my term. I think I've read radical collaboration somewhere. But I value the process of innovation heavily. If I'm in a space where nothing innovative is going on, or where you're just kind of plugging and playing as things have always been, I will curl up and die inside. And and for a long time, I thought that's what work was. You just take a thing and you go with it. And as I discovered this world of design thinking, I realized that innovation is a culture. Innovation is an industry. And that's where I want to be.
So you felt like that setting was very restricting, and then here you are kind of looking, and you found, and it fits nicely with your experience, and also I guess the practical things that you were doing in your line of work, but it was just a different approach, right?
Kind of, yeah. It's certainly an approach and a different strategy, but more than anything, it's a culture. It's a mindset. It's how you just look at everything that you do, and it really guides your day-to-day. It guides how you lead. It guides how you interact in teamwork settings. It just guides how you live your life, because when you're open to innovation and you're open to this level of teamwork, you're open to empathy and not just doing something because it was, someone said you should do it, or because that's how the industry's always done it, but asking the people you're doing it for, hey, do you like this? Is this working for you? It's such a simple concept.
Instead of forcing it down their throat, right?
Yeah, or just, and not even that, but just we kind of take for granted that we don't really interact very much with the people that we're trying to serve. And that's not built into a lot of jobs. It certainly wasn't built into the jobs that I was doing early on. And now this entire industry is based on that. Human-centered design is design for humans, which means you talk to humans.
Right, and you hear about it so much more now. Now, backtrack a little bit. You mentioned that you first went to college to study real estate and finance and realized that was not a fit and kept searching. The reason I am now thinking about this question is related to our first guest who talked about sort of this pressure to do, to go through a certain route. What was that like for you? I mean, when you were still deciding your major or even switching career paths or switching majors, what was like your home environment? What were the pressures or lack of pressures like?
You know, it's interesting. I can definitely relate to this from your first guest and with you as well. Being Armenian American is a very interesting experience that impacts your career, I think, more than anybody could imagine, more than is talked about. Because you come from this background of, my parents did cool things in Armenia. One got a doctorate in music, the other one was a registered nurse, and they obviously knew the system, so it's not like I was the first person in my family to go to college, but when they came here, they didn't know anything. And I was kind of left piecing together what the work world is like here and what college is like. And the public institutions I was in were not really helpful. They were very much cookie cutter. And so I always felt like it was a struggle. And that's why I blindly went down the law school path. The finance was my own. Actually, I find finance to be very fun. Finance and economics is just really great, and maybe in a different world, I would have been an economist. But I would have no way on earth of knowing that design thinking existed, or that creative careers even existed, or that you could make a living off of journalism, because that was always my background thing, that, I would love to be a writer, but you can't make a living off journalism. Says who? That's nothing. That's a cultural script that somehow got translated down the line,
Absolutely.
And I believed it for a very long time. That's why I made some choices that early on in my career that I may not have made now. And I kicked myself a lot when I discovered design thinking as a field and as a calling in service design specifically. I did kind of go through a mourning period where I mourned the loss of the last 10 years, thinking, I wish I had discovered this sooner. But how could I have, especially with this field? It's so new. There were 7 people who knew about it, 20 years ago. And I would have never been part of that, elite crew. Our paths would have never crossed. So you just have to accept it and be okay that a lot of people never find the thing that they're so excited about ever. And I found it in my early 30s, so I guess I'm ahead. Be okay with that.
That's a really good point. I think a lot of people, not just women who are thinking about entrepreneurship, oftentimes get in this mindset of, well, I've already worked towards this career. Why would I take that jump and start over?
Yeah.
Right? Because, I mean, in essence, it's a brand new career that you're starting, especially in entrepreneurship, but it's even more risky, per se, right?
It is.
So that's really interesting. Okay, now fast forward, I guess. So when you got to the point where you decided, okay, this is not the right environment, and now you've been exposed to service design, we talked about this briefly. How do you actually explore that and launch? How do you take the leap and balance sort of this need for some security or even balance whether this exploration is, worth the risk?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that second part is interesting. We should come back to that. But for me, I guess it was a blessing in disguise that I was kind of restless at my day jobs, because I always had something else on the side. Whether it was in my 20s, I launched a T-shirt company, and then I launched a convertible clothing company, and those were just my creative outlets. And then I started freelancing marketing on the side, and that it came out of a variety of things. Part of it was boredom, but part of it was just being excited to do more and more. And that was actually what later allowed me to make the transition much more smoothly, because I already had a footing in something. But I've thought about this a lot, because that's the typical advice that you get, just to have something else before you jump ship. And to be honest, the concept of that is not very human-centered, because when you think about huge life changes, for example, when you, I don't know, leave a marriage, nobody tells you to have something else on the side and, half-ass
Well, that
the
could be
end
the
of
reason why.
yeah, people do it, but not that they should. Or when you, I don't know, when you're switching countries, you don't live 6 months in one country and 6 months in another. You just kind of take the risk, and you try to find a way to not die in the process.
And I think what you're saying is when you don't have a choice and you have to make this work, this is the only thing that you have, then it makes you more focused or more, I don't know, maybe it allows you to just be more dedicated to whatever it is that you're planning to launch. Is that sort of part of it?
Yeah, it does, because that half in, half out thing, I suggested a little bit, because I would be lying if I said that if I didn't say that that's what I did, because that was certainly a huge factor early on for me. But I do believe that when you people hide behind that a lot. And they say, oh, well, I don't feel like developing another business for the next year before I jump ship. I'd rather just be miserable, or I'd rather just not grow. And I find that very fascinating, because it's really easy to get caught up in that. And so, interestingly enough, one of the design thinking principles that kind of feeds this and that I've adopted to help me overcome this is the idea of rapid prototyping. So it's not like, slap something together and release it for the world, but it's thoughtfully design a version 1 or even a version 0 and just make it exist in the world.
Yes.
And
yes, okay, sorry, I have to interrupt, because just yesterday I was talking to a woman, hopefully she's watching right now, and she was talking about all these ideas that she has, and she's just, she's a creative, she's also in a traditional career, and she just has this inkling and this desire to explore these other interests, but she has so many interests and she doesn't know where to start. And I think in our conversation I said, I think pick one and just try it out. But this idea kind of sets a framework. So can you go into that a little bit more? I mean, what does it take? Like, if somebody is launching an idea, what does it mean to prototype? Like, what are the steps, if there are any?
Yeah, well, so the idea of launching, there's so many different components that go into it, right? Usually it starts with a website, although it doesn't have to, and I think that should only be true 50% of the time. But it's a thing, right? If you're creating a business, if you're creating a jewelry line, or if you're creating, I don't know, nail polish for dogs, it's a tangible thing.
I would totally buy that.
It's a very tangible thing, and there are step zeros that you can take to make it happen. Just picking one thing. For example, if you want to launch the nail polish for dogs, you can try it. You can just sketch colors. That is a very real first step that will take you towards the next steps.
Yes.
But I feel like the fear of jumping into entrepreneurship, that is seen as such a little thing. Like, oh, that won't matter. That won't make a difference. Sketching colors. Well, of course it will. Or just go into a puppy pet salon and ask strangers, would they,
do your research, do some market research.
Yeah, talking to people. And that's the first step of the design thinking and service design process. So that I found that that's a very important first step to entrepreneurship. It's not, and I always say this too with the caveat, it's not going around and asking people, do you want this service, would you pay for it? That statement that everyone quotes from Henry Ford, if you asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. That's nonsense. Yes, that worked in his case, but I'm not saying ask people if they want a faster horse. I'm saying get to know the demographic that you want to serve. Identify the problem that you're trying to serve. Spend a month of your life doing that, because that is the first step towards entrepreneurship. And I have found that when you do that, it weeds out your interests. It really helps you zone in, because when you're thinking about it in the context of what is the problem that I'm trying to solve, who am I trying to solve this for, how am I trying to make their life better and the world better, and therefore my life better, you find yourself naturally gravitating towards things that you would rather pursue. So those 50 ideas, get boiled down into one.
I
Or
love that.
they get boiled down into an industry, and you think, okay, well, I really want to serve the animal industry. It might not be with puppy nail polish, but it might be with organic health food for dogs. And I have a contact at a bakery that will let me have a tiny corner in the store. And I have a lot of friends who have dogs, and I can use this to get like an initial offering and get an initial audience. So there's a lot of clarity that comes with taking that step 0.
I love that it's like the comparison that you had set up there is it's not just validating your existing idea, right? It's not just going and asking, would you want to put nail polish on your puppy's nails or claws? Some might say yes, and some might say adamantly no. But what you're saying is there really a need? You know, how do we dig deeper into this?
Yeah.
And I think that's so true when you think about all possibly having so many different ideas and going into each one in that approach where it's not just this creative idea, there's actually a need that I'm solving, that I'm addressing. I like that.
Yeah, that's one of the best, the greatest things I have enjoyed about the startup culture and the entrepreneurship culture. The idea of solving a problem, that your business solving a problem, because it reminds you that you exist to help humans. And I found that can get lost when you're in, not the opposite of an entrepreneurial environment, whether it's corporate or even working for a small business. You just kind of get caught up in doing whatever it is that you're doing, and you don't ask the why, which is another thing that I realized. I was asking why too much, and it was annoying everybody around me.
So too many whys could be detrimental in some environments, but not in this.
Not in the entrepreneurial environment, because it thrives. It can only exist if you keep asking why, and if you look for the problems and you try to solve them, because that, it brings this very human-centered just world.
We're all inquisitive, right?
Yeah, and when you ask why enough, you get to answers, you get to problems, and then you want to solve those problems. And isn't that the whole point of us doing this, if not to make something better for someone else?
Right. Yes, absolutely. And I think, that reminds me, a long time ago I did the sales training, and the approach was always finding out the pain points or the emotional needs of your customer.
Yeah.
And the trick to that is always asking more whys or more close or more open-ended questions. So rather than just accepting at face value, this is what I need because of this, well, why?
Yeah.
And then you keep going and going until you find out, oh, well, it's actually because I'm losing my job, and then you get to the real meat of the emotional pain.
Yeah.
And then there's no way they could go back, right? Because it's not just comparing the product or the service or even the price. It's this is the real reason I need to buy this. I need this in my life.
Yeah.
And it's more targeted. So, all right. Well, a couple of other things around launching, and then we'll go into more of the resources and the design thinking stuff. You mentioned in our conversation this idea of even if you're already in your business or you're running your business, it could be that also runs its course, and you have to make a decision whether you want to stay and continue to cultivate it, or you go and start something else. So tell me about that experience for you and what you've learned and what you'd want to impart.
Well, for me, I did go through a transition with my primary business. It had the Y Lab. It had originally started off as a full-service marketing agency. The thing that I was doing a little bit differently was I wasn't just doing social media or just public relations or just web development, but it was an integrated marketing agency. So I was focusing very much on complete plans and empowering businesses in a way that they could have a full marketing department and make the most of their resources. And that came with a certain set of characteristics. I had a team of graphic designers and interns, and I had an office for that. And I was spending a lot of real-time hours doing certain parts of that work. And I realized that while it was great for the time that I was doing it, this was around the time when I was transitioning into design thinking. I realized I don't want to run a marketing agency my whole life either, and I especially wasn't interested in running a full service agency for many different reasons. You know, looking at that business model, and that I wasn't interested in competing with large full service agencies. I didn't want that to be my personal brand. Because I knew there was something more specific that I was looking forward to. So for me, that transition period too, I kind of ended up treating my business as my own day job as I developed my other skill set, and as I really found a way to transition that business into being a service design agency and an innovation agency, which is very, very different from full service marketing agency where you're
It's
giving
very
people
specific.
social media plans.
Yeah, it's almost like a portion of that entire ecosystem, right? And sorry, I was kind of smirking because I can imagine this conversation you were having as your boss and recognizing that your employee, you, were thinking about jumping ship.
Yeah, it was very awkward. A lot of talking to myself in the mirror.
So I think that's great advice. I mean, I think not only for myself, I've explored different entrepreneurial paths and in different, I guess, industries, and there have been times where I thought, you know what, this is not necessarily how I want to build my life. But then you go through that process again of kind of like what you were saying. Okay, plan out the next steps and plan out, you know, what your basically what your take the leap plan or process will be.
Yeah.
So in doing this a couple of times, were there certain things that you discovered to be kind of a formula whenever you're thinking about, okay, is this, even assessing whether this is the right thing for you right now? Like, how do you do that? Do you do that like on a yearly basis, or?
So for me, I will definitely always be evolving. I'm very aware that what my professional life and even personal life looks like right now is going to be very different than what it will look like in 1 year, in 2 years.
So just being open to that is, I think, key.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is not being defined by your title and the work that you're doing.
Yes.
And that was another glorious tidbit that came out of jumping from being someone's employee to an entrepreneurial lifestyle, is that you do kind of start to associate yourself with that title. You kind of, I don't know, you clutch it to your chest Gollum style, and it's meant to, I don't know, it's this culture that you can't really see your way out of it unless you yank yourself out of it, because for a long time I fell prey to that. I thought that having manager in my title was great, but I realized it's what makes me a good leader that matters, because that's what stays with me. And I think that realizing that and getting your freedom from that is a good step to know that you can't just be, stuck in what you're doing forever, to know that kind of opens you up to this evolution, because right now our culture is progress. Our culture is not defined by any one thing. It's defined by the idea of progress. And I think embodying that professionally helps you actually evolve as a human being as the world is evolving around us right now.
And I feel like we can talk about this in more detail and more depth because of how we define success versus happiness, and the traditional version of success that probably plagued our society up until maybe the financial meltdown, right? And now how we're defining that, like to your point, it's almost like we're in this new culture of progress, which equates to entrepreneurship or entrepreneurialism, right? Because you're having to work on yourself on your own, and you're having to define the next steps for yourself rather than allowing the system or this paradigm. Okay, that's getting too deep. We can save that for the off the record.
For a glass of wine later today.
I don't need a glass of wine to talk about that. No, it's true. It's I think it's deeper, but I think it's also the questions that you tend to ask yourself, especially as you're making a jump from corporate, as you've acquired those titles or as you've climbed the ladder, right?
Yeah.
Then you ask, okay, well, if I give this up, what does that mean about me and my self-worth?
Yeah.
And then if I have to prove myself in this new venture, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And what if I don't prove myself? Then all of a sudden you have all these fears, right, that are kind of taken over.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, just like the idea of having a little bit of a safety net to transition through, I feel like that counts not just financially but emotionally as well. Because when you do develop that safety net for yourself, when you separate yourself from the work you do during the day and then you develop who you are as a human being, then you're providing yourself that foundation where you won't need to make such a huge leap because you're a lot more secure. You're just a lot more just straight up knowledgeable about who you are as a person and who you are professionally. And that confidence that you've developed will be the thing that lets you finally make that leap when you're ready to do it. Without that, I find that it's impossible.
So I think what I'm learning is every time we have a guest here, I'm getting life coaching. Rodney, I hope you're getting that too. You know, it's because the entrepreneurial journey really is about so much reflection and so much of believing in yourself in order to take that leap and then to continue. So every time, I'm just so thankful and so grateful that, you know, I'm getting all this wisdom. So I want to switch gears a little bit to some of the resources that you have not only really leveraged, thank you so much for bringing all these great books, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
But some of the resources that you have also utilized to kind of explore design thinking a little bit more and also to enhance your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, ooh, fun. Okay, so this is the inside of my brain. I think
Beautiful brain.
I think that I have definitely accumulated a set of resources that I look to, or just even a set of knowledge and people and information that I've gone through and kind of relied on as I've gone through this journey, because no one can do it alone. But it's so great, especially we live in such a great time that people are so willing to share their knowledge. And especially, this is kind of excellent validation that excites me as a former marketer, that now a huge part of business strategy is sharing your knowledge and sharing your resources. And people do it because there's something in it for everybody.
That's true.
So I love the concept of taking advantage of learning from everybody. Because, again, in a corporate setting or in a different setting, that can come across as obnoxious. But in an entrepreneurial setting, that is celebrated, and that's what you need for survival. So, I've mentioned a few, and I've prepared a resource set for the viewers.
That's right.
That you can download, and it has links to all of these and a bunch of websites and books that you can check out. And we'll put up the link. It's thewylab.com/FoundHer. We can talk about that more later. But and it includes all of these in addition to some websites. But so let's see. So I've gone through a bunch. One of the key ones that impacted me a lot was this writer named James Altucher, who is really cool. I'm sure by now everybody's heard of him. So he used to be a former computer programmer, and he's gone through an interesting career evolution, but at some point he had this huge entrepreneurial journey. He had founded a bunch of really big tech startups, and so he did a bunch of cool things, and then he lost all his money, and then he did it again, and through it all he discovered some truths about life. And one of the key philosophies that I follow of his was this idea of choosing yourself. And it really does focus on the new world order of entrepreneurialism being the
tongue twister.
That's a long word. Being the new norm, and the idea of choosing yourself as a person instead of choosing to blindly do things because society tells us to, or because that's just the path.
A very empowering mindset.
It really is. And so he has a few things that he does during the day and like daily practices, but the key thing that I did that made a huge difference was he has this philosophy called becoming an idea machine. So he makes top 10 lists of anything. I mean, he calls them ideas, and they don't have to be like, make a list of 10 business ideas every day. That's not what it's about. It's just top 10 lists following a prompt, like 10 ways to improve the airline, the flight process, or my 10 favorite comedy movies of all time. It can really range. It's basically just a top 10 list.
And he does this every day.
He does this every day. And so when he started talking about this and blogging about this, other people started doing it. I, of course, jumped on it because I live for this stuff. I live for that idea. It's like Sudoku for ideas.
It's like exercising your brain, right? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and and so there were communities that were built around this. I'm part of one. It's a Facebook group. We call ourselves the Idealists. And we have a moderator, and she posts a prompt for the day, so we all kind of riff on this one idea.
I love that.
And it's been amazing. Because the key thing is you don't have to do something with all these ideas, but it just gets your brain moving and it gets your confidence up. And you look back and you're proud. I mean, I look back into the journal of this, and I've been doing it for a while now, and I have 2,000 things that I've listed, 2,000 ideas. That's a lot, because 10 a day for many days adds up, right?
Right. And do you do that throughout the day, or do you kind of take some dedicated time just to write that out?
It depends.
Just whatever you're feeling.
Yeah, it really depends. I found that when I do it towards the end of the day, I have too much energy then, because that has now it's stirred up my brain, and then I can't go to sleep.
Yeah, no, that sounds like actually Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, kind of has something similar, but it's morning pages. So 3 pages of just free writing, whatever is flowing in your brain. And I think it's the same concept, right? It's getting
similar,
getting things down on paper, allowing your ideas to flow.
Yeah.
In this case, it's more structured, right?
Yeah. And I think this it helps you see the possibilities of things in the world, because you could be making a list of 10 rejected Crayola colors, and it's not easy. The first 3 are easy, and that's what he always says too. But then it gets hard after 4, 5, 6. When you get to 8, and you're like, oh man, I just need 3 more, and you want them to be good. It gets hard, and the inspiration that you get from it, it's not tied into anything in particular. Or it can be. For example, for a while, my set of ideas were just next steps for what I was doing to build my podcast. So it was like...
It could be applied to whatever you're actually working on.
Yeah, right? Like, 10 guests I could have. Well, that's a list, and you had to do it anyway, but now you've structured it, and you've put it in this, part, 10 places to promote my podcast, or 10 topics that I want to talk about, part 1, part 2.
Okay, let's talk about the podcast, and also I think the brand that you're building around design thinking, right? Can we jump into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the most exciting thing that I'll talk about all day.
What episode are you on now? Like 12?
I'm on episode, I want to say 11, but
Yeah.
I had 3 freebie episodes.
Okay.
So I've recorded a lot. I've kind of backlogged it. But so my podcast is called Why Service Design Thinking, and it's dedicated to educating the world about service design, specifically educating sector of the business community about service design who may not normally learn about it. So design thinking is getting really big in the corporate world, and it's getting really big in the agency world, and there are a number of agencies that utilize the concept and provide these services around that path. But I feel that the small business community and the medium-sized business community and the nonprofit community could benefit from this, I might even say the most. And I found that being in that community as a small business owner, I found that it's difficult to really learn and adopt a resource like this. It's...
Why is that? Oh, sorry, I'm asking the whys now. The why lab.
I love that. I mean, I think it's a number of reasons. Part of it is that this industry is still fairly new, and it's still kind of gaining its footing and gaining reach.
And is it resources related too? Do you think that?
Actually, I wouldn't even say that, because this is one of those where everybody that loves this concept just will put out free resources. There's actually an abundance of free resources available in design thinking. I think part of it too is tailoring it for the needs of this kind of setting, tailoring it for a small business
Sure.
setting, because while the concepts are the same, I think introducing it in a way that's easy to digest would make a huge difference. So that's actually part of the reason I chose a podcast instead of a blog or a book or anything else, is that I can dive into specific topics individually. The small business community and the entrepreneur community loves podcasts, so it's exactly where the target demographic is. And it gives me an opportunity to just make it easy and accessible. So, it's not necessarily just let's talk about service design or design thinking with cool people. It's, hey, today we're going to talk about research. And we're going to tell you the first thing you need to take, the first step you need to take to conduct research for a project.
Well, let's do that though. Let's talk about service design with cool people, the two of us. For people who don't already know, and we've had this conversation actually really just at the surface, because the reason we met was you were doing some kind of service design pop-up project that you were launching, right?
Yeah.
But can we just define service design? What does it mean when someone is using this approach, or what does it mean when you're looking at a human-centric design?
Yes. Oh, it's so funny. It's always, for some reason, it never occurs to me to define it.
Me neither.
There's a running joke that if you ask like 10 design thinkers or 10 service designers what the definition is, you'll get 11 different answers.
Oh.
Because it kind of means different things to different people.
Okay.
But so at its core, design thinking is a process that is used to innovate or solve problems. It's a process. It's a step-by-step process that you take, and it has a few core values that guide it. So design thinking and human-centered design are kind of the umbrella topic. And then you get into more specific. Service design is specifically for service-related businesses.
Okay.
So there are a few different components for that may not exist, let's say, in a product context or in a different context. Like for services, you have what's called a front end and a back end. So you need to consider that the differentiator of here's what happens front
so
stage.
Usually the sales are
backstage.
sort of appealing to the customer, and then the backstage would be production, or
what it takes to make that happen. And then there's business design, which is more like business modeling. So there are different components of it. But so at its core, there are 5 different steps.
Okay.
There is the first step of empathy/research, which is gathering information, having in-depth interviews, really understanding the people and the demographics and the communities that you're trying to serve.
Has this been shaped by psychology too?
Yes.
Okay.
You'll see a lot of psychology nuts, myself included, in this field. It's really interesting as I've interviewed them, to discover that commonality. Yes. So you do research, and then you have to make sense of that research, right? You get a bunch of information. Then you have to synthesize it. So as you do that, patterns start to emerge. So let's say you've talked to 20 people about, let's do puppy nail polish. Sure, why the hell not?
That's a great service.
About, I don't know why that's top of mind. About the idea of their relationship with their pets and just that whole culture and their habits surrounding it. And then you start to see certain patterns that emerge. Like, okay, a lot of people tend to mention that their pets don't like to be dressed up as much as we humans think they do.
What?
Or you might see, I know. Or you might see other patterns of it's stressful for the human to take their pet to get groomed. Like, you'll see things emerge. And once you've seen these patterns emerge, then you have to identify a problem statement. Because that problem might not be what you originally came in with. Especially, you're not identifying ideas. This step, you're specifically identifying the pain point, the problem that we talked about.
Yep.
And we usually frame it in a context of how might we, because it's very much an open, anything is possible, let's
I'm
solve
picturing
this
the
problem.
Post-its right now.
Yes,
right?
oh, lots and lots of Post-its, lots of Post-its. So once you've identified the problem, then you dedicate some time to this rapid ideation and to this radical collaboration where you're just coming up with ways to solve it. And anything really goes. This is very much like there's some roots in improv comedy where you have the yes and philosophy of you think of, could this be a solution? Could we look into this other alternate field that might help us find solutions? You just kind of ideate, and that's where the 10 ideas a day thing has really benefited me as well, because you think on your feet very quickly. So once you do that, you'll have solutions that emerge, and you have some idea of a solution, and then the idea is to jump immediately into prototyping it, the rapid prototyping, where you don't overthink it. You're okay with your draft zero. Yeah, and a prototype could really even be a conversation. There's so many different ways to prototype, especially in service design, which is exciting because your service might be a kiosk in a park as a public service, but your prototype could be a guy standing in a box talking to people and just holding up a sign that says, "Ask me questions about the park." Yeah.
Good first start.
It is, because you're getting that information, you know, or I love that the lean startup methodology is kind of also similar to this, because people do that with a lot of apps and digital programs, that you could have a paper prototype. And
could someone, okay, I mean, we talked about service, and just a minute ago I was thinking, a lot of times when business owners, especially ones with a brick and mortar, when they try to improve their service, they usually look at the process.
Yeah.
Right? They dive right into the process. So just to kind of put a different image in our heads, restaurants.
Yes.
Restaurants, I mean, that is probably one of the biggest service, right? Service businesses.
Yeah.
Service-based businesses. And oftentimes, operations and human capital are the first things to look at to improve.
Yeah.
How would you then approach that in a service-based approach?
Oh, I'm glad you said that. I have worked with restaurants, and that was where I saw the biggest need. I think the biggest thing with restaurants is that nothing is set in stone. That you have, every person that walks through the door is an opportunity to prototype something. One of the things that I love and that I often suggested was, think of whatever it is that you're prototyping. If you're prototyping a new menu, do it today. Just your first 10 customers of the day, give them a freebie appetizer of this thing that you're trying to test. It's worth the $50 in materials cost that's going to allow you to do this, but do it and get feedback, you know? Or if you want to bring in like a new huge offering or like a series of something, host an event. Like if you want to have a weekly wine tasting series, do the first one next week, you know? Don't just wait until it's this huge thing, until it's perfected and you've ironed out all the kinks, because there's no way you could iron out all the kinks until you put it in front of humans. So I will, before we get off this, I need to say the last step of the design thinking process, and it's prototyping and testing. So excellent transition, but make your prototype, test it, and then that's a loop. Those last two steps are a loop until you're comfortable with the solution.
And you mentioned, I mean, when we talked about the sign, you said, oh, you're prototyping.
Yes, oh, that was exciting, because so I watched your first episode and I saw you the day you were scoping out the space, and it's really cool to see that you've made little changes, and that's exactly what prototyping is. You know, you now have the sign. I noticed you've got the curtains, because there are people you know, moving behind the window.
Right.
You've got this awesome desk in the plant, and the thing that says found, the jar.
Right.
So that's an excellent idea, because you know, you're at this stage of your business, you're going to be constantly prototyping, in your case live in front of an audience.
See, guys, we're doing something right.
This is Anna Marie's experiment. We're all in it. And
I'm so vulnerable right now. You're getting to see everything.
But that's cool, and that's part of the process.
Yeah.
Because I experienced that with my podcast as well, where you know, every episode is kind of a prototype, and I'll try different things.
Right.
I'll try different microphones, and at first, the first few episodes I recorded were earlier prototypes, and I was really nervous about them because the quality was not as great as, you know, I hadn't found my voice as well, and I was nervous about releasing them because I kind of, you know, I recorded so many episodes in advance as part of the strategy for not, for being ahead of schedule.
For having more content.
And then when I went back to it, I was like, well, what kind of example am I setting if I can't be willing to release my first prototype, even if it's a little bit later, you know, in the process?
Yes, I love
because
that.
it's okay, and I will be, okay, what it will look like a year from now will be drastically different. And I always think about this lean startup methodology, concept that they say, if you're not embarrassed by your first draft, you launch too late. And that's kind of given me a lot of comfort, because it's not to say that you should, you know, half-ass something and launch it, but you should get it to a point where it's good enough to see the world, and then let it see the world.
Right.
And be totally okay with that, and know that it's going to be better every single time you do it.
This is such validation because Rodney and I were thinking about this, even as this process was happening, and we kept kind of like, teetering, like, oh, are we ready? Oh, I don't know. We don't have this. We don't have that. And you know what? Just put it out there. Let's see what happens. And I mean, obviously, it's a work in progress. And like you're saying, there's so many opportunities to improve on the last one, and that's obviously what we've been doing. And I think what your point is too is in this concept of service design, prototyping means that you're being thoughtful, you're being intentional, but there's also this sense of urgency that you just need to get it out there. You need to test it, because if you don't, it's just going to be an idea, right? It's just gonna live and exist in your brain as an idea. And then when you look back, 5 years later, that idea has just kind of vanished, or it's still there as it's called regret. So I love that. And I want to make sure to turn people onto the resources, or just to how to connect you, actually. I know that you teach at General Assembly. Are you still doing? Okay. Do you have any classes coming up or any workshops coming up?
I do. So since this will air actually the Friday, which is the 24th, Friday morning, I'm actually teaching a design thinking workshop from 8:30 to 10, and we'll be redesigning the LA commute. So we'll be going through the design thinking process to ideate and interview each other and redesign the LA commute for each other.
That sounds so cool.
It's so fun. Oh, you should come if you're in the area. It'll be at the Santa Monica General Assembly. But I do teach design thinking and service design workshops there, and I also teach a human-centered SEO workshop, which sounds like it's not related, but it really is, because I approach SEO from a human-centered design perspective.
And so there's an opportunity for folks to connect with you there. Do you also do any individual consulting for your business?
I do. So I do consulting in a variety of settings. I work with businesses either as an individual, or I assemble a team where needed. Specifically to look at take a design thinking approach and a service design approach to whatever is the problem that they want to solve. So a lot of times within a business, I'll do a workshop and I'll go through the customer journey mapping with the stakeholders of the business, or I'll go in and do research and kind of engage their community and help the business owners better understand their customers. So I do that through my company called the Y Lab.
The Y Lab, yes.
And just recently I've started a partnership with our mutual friend Brian Alano, where we will be doing we'll be combining all of these things. We'll be combining marketing strategy with design thinking in a pop-up agency way. So
doesn't that sound fun?
It's so fun.
A pop-up, like marketing slash...
It'll be taking a design thinking approach to solve their problem, but we'll be doing it in just a few days instead of like having a retainer consultancy.
Very different. That really is a disruptor right there.
It is. It really is. And the goal is to empower people to adopt this process, to understand how possible it is and how accessible it is, but at the same time to have tangible marketing materials, because if you do something in your business and there's no video of it, did it really happen? It kind of helps me bridge that gap of knowing how important marketing is.
Yes.
But and giving them the assets, because once you've come up with a great idea, it's not enough. You have to execute it.
Right. I think that's the hardest part.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Y Lab is thewylab.com. General Assembly is on Friday, the 24th, and then you also have your individual consulting that people can ask you about. And I think we have maybe time for a question, perhaps, here's actually a question.
We're getting questions coming in.
So I have a family business, which means a lot of different opinions. What's the best way to start design thinking?
Ooh, that is an excellent question. Well, different opinions are good, because that's part of the collaborative process, the co-creation process. I would say for a family business that has a bunch of people who want to participate, that's good. That's a gift. That means they're all engaged and they want to participate. The first thing is make sure that they're all open. open-minded and open to things happening that didn't come out of their own brains,
Sure.
open to other people's ideas.
Sure.
I think if that involves just, a big old bottle of vodka to get your family, together, or
So it's more casual.
whatever.
Right.
I think having that conversation before you start anything. This is not an official process. This is just my opinion from knowing small businesses and family-owned businesses very closely. If that doesn't happen, then it's set up to fail. Don't do it. Just give up. Go start your own business. Because
just leave the family, do your own
quit
thing.
the family. That can't happen. I see that happen a lot in family businesses. That
There's a lot of conflict, right? Most of
Yeah,
the
and
time.
just psychological dynamic plays out, which has no place in business.
Yeah.
Family dynamic has no place in business. Like if you're, if there's a matriarchal situation, that has no place in business. You can't evolve if you have a dictator, because in a family that might be matriarchal, but in a business that's called being a dictator and nothing gets, you can't innovate.
Right.
So once that's happened, and once you're all on the same page that you are open and you want to have this process, maybe do an improv comedy exercise that tends to help break the ice, then I think you should identify what area everyone has their opinions in and make them go do research in that area. If someone says, I believe our customers want this, then give them that homework of going in to talk to people.
That's such a great idea, because then each person is doing they're putting on their design thinking hat in that particular thing they're passionate about, right? And go ahead, prove it, and then come back.
Yeah. And if, I think that once they have a clear concept of what problem it is that they're trying to solve, then everyone should come together and follow the steps of the design thinking process, and know that, they might have different opinions, and maybe, I don't know, take turns every month, pick, one person's area if they want to innovate in that or improve in that. But go through the design thinking process for one thing altogether. Once you've had a chance to really iron out what it is that we're trying to solve, we dove into the things that they're interested in. And prototype. And again, you have to be open, right? You have to be open-minded and be willing to do this, everybody, in order for this to work.
No, I told you so's.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, no, I told you so's. I love that. I love that. No, I told you so's. There's no place for that in design thinking.
Yes. Okay. Well, this has been so fun and so incredibly educational. And I'm so glad that people are going to be able to not only, get a hold of you and ask you for potentially some advice here. I do want to mention that Marina is going to be commuting to her program. She's starting a master's program in design thinking, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us briefly about that?
Oh, it's really cool.
And where you're commuting to?
As part of my process, I've identified this amazing school and program and group of people. It's at Parsons, the new school, at their Parsons Paris campus. So I will be commuting to Paris for the next couple of years for this program. But it's really cool. I'll be commuting to Paris, China, and New York. And it'll we'll be looking at this process in the business landscape internationally.
Wow.
The cohort is there are, I think, maybe 3 of us in the U.S. The rest are from around the world.
That's awesome.
So
There's going to be such an incredible exchange.
yes.
Right?
Oh, I can only imagine. It starts in a couple weeks, actually. So.
Yeah. That's awesome. And we're so glad we were able to get you here before you leave for your trip or for school. And just want to thank you again for being here, for giving your time, but also giving all this, just a wealth of knowledge, all these great resources. And I hope that, ultimately we can have you back on the show to talk more about the next phase of not only your business, but, what you're learning as you go through this program.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a beautiful program, and I can't wait to see what more you do with it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your support. Now, I just also want to thank everybody for their support of the program. We have a few partners that we work with on a regular basis. Of course, this studio couldn't be possible without our friends at Parts and Labor, and Brian Alano, who's an amazing, just incredible photographer and lifestyle photographer and artist, you name it. He's doing everything. He's out of town right now, so we could just freely use the space. I want to also thank Found Coffee, who gave us these awesome mugs. So they're Found Coffee. We're FoundHer, so here we go, Found. And lastly, I just want to turn you over to all of our social media. If you find this useful at all, and if you know anybody else that could benefit from this information, please share it. Spread the word. So we're on Facebook at FoundHer. We're on Instagram and Twitter at FoundHerBiz. That's FoundHer, B-I-Z. And of course on the website at foundher.biz. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.